Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Mr. Stid and welcome to another educational video. Today we're going to be talking about figurative language and we're going to review what we talked about yesterday. So this is part one of the review, so let's jump right into it. Yesterday we learned 4 types of figurative language. I'm going to give you those 4 again, their definition, and then I'm going to give you a few examples. So let's jump right into it. Yesterday we learned about 4 different types of figurative language, and they're broken up into 2 categories. So the first 2 are under the category of comparisons. When an author makes a comparison in a text, he's going to be using either a simile or a metaphor. Okay? A simile compares 2 things using the words like or as, and a metaphor compares 2 things not using the words like or as. So very, very similar, but slightly different. Okay? That's in the comparisons category. Figurative language in the dramatic descriptions category includes personification and hyperbole. So in the first one, personification, that's giving human qualities to non-human things. Second, hyperbole is exaggerating the description of something, so going over the top in your exaggeration. So with these 4 things in mind, this is what we learned yesterday. Now let me get into a review. Let me show you some examples, and then I want to give you some clues for each example. So the first thing is a simile. Let me give you some examples. I want you to pretend like you were given the prompt to write about your favorite television show in which you use 3 examples of a simile. Now here are my 3 examples. If I was going to talk about my favorite TV show and compare it to something else, I could use a simile. I would say my favorite show is like a holiday vacation. So I'm comparing it. It's so good, it's like going on vacation. That's like my favorite show. A second example would be my favorite show is like a hangout with a good friend. So I'm comparing my favorite show to a hangout with a good friend using the word like. Last but not least, my favorite show is as good as an ice cream cone in the summer. So I'm comparing that amazing show to an ice cream cone in the summer using the word as. These are 3 excellent examples of a simile. Now, if you are asked to identify a simile, here are some clues that you should look for. First of all, does the example use the word like or as? If it's making a comparison, and it uses the words like or as, right away that should be an alarm in your head that says this is a simile. Okay? Also, if you're reading an example, look for a comparison of 2 things. It can't just say, I like cheese. That's not comparing anything. That's just saying you like cheese. So it uses the word like, but it needs to also be comparing 2 things. So be mindful of these 2 clues as you're doing similes. Alright, next, what about a metaphor? What if I asked you to write about your hero or your favorite famous person in which you use 3 examples of a metaphor? So if I'm comparing my favorite celebrity or my favorite hero to something, I could use a metaphor. I could say Lebron James is a bright superstar. So it's very similar to a simile, but I'm not using the word like. I'm just saying is. He is a bright superstar. Number 2, LeBron James was a leaping frog last night. So again, comparing him to something, not using like or as. Number 3, LeBron James is a powerful kangaroo. So all 3 of those examples compare, but they don't use the words like or as. So when you're trying to identify a metaphor or write a metaphor, here are your clues. It must compare 2 things. So just like a simile, it must compare 2 things, but here's the key. Number 2, it does not use the words like or as. So those are your clues that it's a metaphor and not a simile. Alright, next, personification. What if I asked you to write about something in nature in which you use 3 examples of personification? I might say something like this: the tree danced in the wind during the hurricane. Or number 2, the rock screamed through the air after I threw it. Or number 3, the clouds bounced up and down in the sky. So each of these examples are personification because I'm giving human qualities to something that's not a human. The tree danced, the rock screamed, the cloud bounced. They don't have human body parts like legs or a mouth to be able to do these things, but when I'm personifying them, I'm using descriptive language to give them those qualities. So these are 3 great examples of personification. Here are your clues. If you're asked to identify or create personification, you must look for the human quality given. So number 1, look for that human quality given. Number 2, look for non-human things that's doing something unusual or out of the ordinary. So if you're reading a passage of poetry or you're reading a story and a non-human thing is doing something strange or unusual, it's probably the author personifying that thing. Okay, so look for these 2 clues next time. Alright, last but not least, what if I asked you to write about a typical day in middle school in which you use 3 examples of a hyperbole? Okay, so hyperbole, extreme exaggeration. You got to go over the top. Check out these 3 examples. The school lunch was so disgusting, I thought I was going to choke and die after I ate it. So are you really going to choke and die after you eat that delicious-looking meatloaf to the right? Probably not. So you're being very, very dramatic and you're exaggerating. So that would be a great example of hyperbole. Number 2, the hallways were so crowded, I thought I was going to be crushed to death. Number 3, the weather during recess was so hot, my body almost burned up. So, again, these things aren't actually going to happen. But when we're using hyperbole, we're exaggerating our description. Okay? So, clues to look for if it's a hyperbole. Extreme exaggeration. It can't just be a small exaggeration. It's got to be extreme in order to be a hyperbole. So if you're reading a poem or a story and there's something that's being described over the top and in a crazy way, it's probably hyperbole. Number 2, overly dramatic description. If it's just, look at this meme to the right. It might as well be beyond the Great Wall. So this cat is only reaching a few inches to get to the ball, but the cat is being dramatic. It might as well be across the Great Wall of China. So that's an exaggerated, overly dramatic description. So look for those 2 things. Okay, guys, so today we talked about and we reviewed our key concepts from yesterday. The 4 types of figurative language we learned: simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole. Remember, the first category, the first 2 in blue, those are comparisons. So when an author's comparing, it's going to be a simile or metaphor. And in the red, if it's a dramatic description, it's going to be a personification or a hyperbole. Don't forget the clues that we talked about today. Always be looking for those clues when you're identifying or creating your personification, hyperbole, simile, metaphor. If you need to review this video, please do, and I wish you the best. Thanks so much. Bye.